welcome to Extra Time with Mikaal Abdulla from Securities. He's the co-founder of one of the world's leading fintech firms, and he's going to give us some answers to some difficult questions from you, the listeners, and from me, your host. So, Mikaal, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
So I've had some interesting questions come in. People are very fascinated by your story. I think the obvious questions. For example, one of my listeners has asked, how do you do business in Hong Kong, and do you have any tips for doing business in Asia?
Yeah, so I've had an interesting perspective having split my time in my company in two geographies. So I spent that time in Hong Kong, building out the business, serving not only Hong Kong customers but Chinese customers, and then the other geography was Japan, and the two couldn't be more different. I wrote an article some time ago, and it was really about the trade-off of speed versus quality when it comes to building your startup and building a product. Whereas in China, consumers value affordability, and they are willing to forego quality for speed, convenience, and price. Whereas in Japan, it's sort of the opposite. People are willing to wait, but have no tolerance or patience for a product that isn't of the highest quality. But if you're able to deliver that, they'll pay for it. So the contrast was our customers had a higher lifetime value from Japan, but we're able to sort of, grow much faster in Hong Kong and China. So it's a sort of interesting take on those two geographies.
It's interesting how that comes about. I guess it's like how language develops, really, but it's interesting those different requirements from those different markets. And ultimately, they're human beings that eat 3 meals a day. And why are the requirements so different? Did it surprise you?
It did, because I went to Japan with the same mindset that I had, in Hong Kong, and again that was speed, and it was funny because you have a team in Japan, and you're talking about concepts like minimal viable product and beta testing with customers, and they look at you like you're an alien. Like, how or why would we launch an imperfect product? The answer to that to me was clear, because we don't know what the perfect product is until customers tell us. But in Japan, it's different. It's take your time, launch the product, but you wouldn't dare launch a product that wasn't perfect. So it's really night and day. I mean, those two geographies just so different. Consumers so different. Mm.
It reminds me, I talk to a lot of entrepreneurs in the UK that listen to way too much American entrepreneur TV because, you're in America, it's all about like failing fast and making, mistakes and trying things. Whereas in the UK, a consumer will often not come back to your product. They had a bad experience once. So, it's very different sometimes in business in one market to the other, although, entrepreneurial advice can be quite generic. So it's interesting that you pick up on the fact, there's two different markets there, Japan and Hong Kong and China, that actually are very different. And so as an entrepreneur, your advice isn't just, an MVP and go for it. In Japan, it's much more be careful, build a product that people are going to like, and they'll pay for it properly if you do, which is important nuance. So I think it's overlooked. But thanks.
Yeah, that's right.
Thanks for highlighting that. So I've got another question here. Now, I know you started your business right after the financial crisis. So a lot of people are not starting businesses after such a big hit in the world. And I think it relates, in my mind, to what's happening now with coronavirus. So I've been recommending to a lot of people that they actually start a business now. If you've been made unemployed, it's probably no better time than right now to start a business. Getting a job's hard. But do you have any thoughts on this? And do you have any tips for entrepreneurs out there that are thinking of starting a business and struggling to get over the line?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, you just have to take the plunge, right? You just have to do it. That's the hardest part is making that sort of binary decision. Do I stay where I am, or am I gonna make this jump? So I think that's step one. You got to just go for it. But I do think it's a remarkable time to start a business. Again, I talked before about the importance of constraints. It really will focus you like nothing else. And I think you sort of take that sort of concept of building a business, with this incredible constraint that's surrounding you. There's going to be constraints around, consumer spending. There's going to be constraints around raising money. There's going to be macro constraints. I mean, they're endless. And if you can manage to build a business and build something that people want on the other end, you're going to be in really great shape. So, having done it, I like it.
Do you believe entrepreneurs are born or bred?
Oh, I think they're born. And the reason I say that is there are a couple of qualities I think entrepreneurs have to have. I think you have to have, you cannot be averse to risk, right? You've got to have a high risk tolerance, number one. I don't think that's easy to teach people. I think you have to be self-directed. Not everybody is. And if I look at my own, market being in Asia, those are two qualities that are very, very hard to find in people. So risk tolerance and being self-directed. And so I think you're born to be an entrepreneur. I think it's difficult to teach. I don't think it's impossible to teach, but I think you have to want to do it. And I have 5 kids. I look at them. It's clear as day who the entrepreneurs are and who the kids are that won't be. I can tell you today.
Yeah, I mean, for anyone listening out there, it's not easy to be an entrepreneur. I think there's some misunderstanding around it. It seems so glamorous these days, doesn't it, with all the rise of successful businesses like yours and others. But it's not at all glamorous, is it?
Not at all. And you will have infinitely more failures and difficulties than you will success. It is really hard, and I think it's one of these things again that until you experience it, it's very, very hard to explain to people. But having said all that, I love it. I love it, and I have no regrets. Whether the business is ultimately successful or not, I have no regrets. The journey's absolutely worth it. And again, I go back to just sort of the freedom that it gives you, and to me, it's invaluable.
I'd just like to pick up on something you just said as well around being an entrepreneur is perhaps you're born as an entrepreneur. And I think what's interesting about your story is that you worked in a company for 10 years. So, there might be a lot of people out there that perhaps don't see themselves as entrepreneurs, but they do take risk, but they're still working for someone else. They do have the ability to have self-direction, but they're still working for someone else. But they might not realize that they actually have the ingredients to be an entrepreneur, and they're in a job that they don't like, and they could start their own thing. So I think that's a very important thing there. Do you realize that you were an entrepreneur during that time, stuck in a job, or you didn't realize?
No, it was fairly late in the process, and it never really even crossed my mind until sort of my sort of end of time at E-Trade. So I agree. I think there are many entrepreneurs out there working for someone else, and if they applied that same energy that they do in their jobs to their own business, they'd be onto something great. So yeah, for sure, I agree with that.
So I've had a question from one of my listeners, and they've said, if you were to start a business today, given what you know and what's happening with coronavirus, what would you do?
Wow. So I think in hindsight, I'll speak to sort of fintech because that's my space. But in hindsight, launching a fully regulated consumer business is a challenge, and I think will continue to be a challenge. Capital requirements are only going to get higher, which in turn means you have to raise, more money and more challenges. So I think it's important to start a business that is going to require very little capital. I'm biased. I guess I've been in consumer businesses all my life, so I like consumer businesses. But I think I'd advise, build a business that where you can build software, you can do it lean, you can do it through good times and bad, before you commit yourself to a business like ours, which really does require, raising a lot of money and does require a lot of red tape. So I think if I were to do it today, I would avoid being a licensed business and would go lean.
So I've got a question here which I find this subject interesting, but what do you feel about co-founders and having partners? Do you think it's a good idea, a bad idea? Is there a magic number around it? What do you think?
I have a co-founder, and I cannot imagine doing this without him. I just would be impossible. And the reality is you just can't be in two places at the same time. So when a business is in fundraising mode, that's a full-time job. You don't stop running the business. And from my perspective, again, I just cannot imagine doing it without a co-founder. So I would advise anyone to get a co-founder. Ideally, someone you've worked with before, someone you trust. I had the benefit that my co-founder and I worked at E-Trade together for 10 years, as did many of our early employees. So, there was an understanding there of everybody's strengths and weaknesses. We're all acutely aware of what we do well and where we need others to step in. And so it worked. But for me, it's a must.
And do you think one co-founder is enough? Or have you any experience with more than that? I mean, you've never been a sole entrepreneur, right? So you don't necessarily you haven't had that experience, but you just feel, having had a partner, that's the only way to go, right?
That's right. Yeah, I think so. And I don't have a view on whether 2 or 3 is the right number, but I think trust is everything. I wouldn't sort of advise someone to sort of jump into business with someone, they don't know. You hear it all the time, and it's a cliche, but it really is like a marriage. So I think trust is everything. You've got to start with someone you trust. But having someone who's got your back, having someone who compensates, your own weaknesses is really invaluable.
You had a 10-year working experience with your co-founder before you started this company together. So that's a very useful thing to have, right? Because I think that trust piece, how do you know if you can trust someone until the moment comes when they get tested, right?
That's right. And, so if you look at the research, most companies fail because of, disputes between founders.
Yes.
Or it's one of the top reasons. And so I think without trust, and you're right, trust has to be tested. But if you have sort of tested trust with someone, I would take that.
Well, I married my business partner, so that's how good our business relationship was. I know you're already married, so it's not going to happen with your co-founder, but I'm a big fan of co-founders. It's a magical thing if you get it right, just like a marriage. It's special if you get it right. So can you explain, for one of my listeners who's asking, how you set up the business? What was your steps to getting the business up and running?
Yeah, so the first step in setting this up was obviously coming up with an idea, coming up with something unique. And again, this is a cliche. Everybody says you have to make sure you have a problem that you're solving before you build a venture. And I think that's absolutely right. I think it's very easy to come up with an idea because you think in your own mind it's a great idea, and you think in your own mind that consumers need it, when in reality they don't. So I think you have to test your idea. That's the first step. Once you've tested out your idea, and that may involve building out a sort of MVP, a very sort of lean product that you can get in consumers' hands and validate it. You then, depending on the type of business you have to fund it, whether that's with your own money or looking for venture capital. And with that comes a very different set of skills that you've had to this point. So to this point, you've been resourceful, you've been creative, you've been analytical, and now you've got to get into sort of sales mode, because it really is pure sales, getting out there and selling your idea and selling your vision. And then once you raise the money, now the hard part starts, because now you've got to generate, a return. You've got shareholders, you've got people's money you're responsible for, and that comes with an enormous amount of pressure. So there's never an easy step, but it is a sequence of events. I think for every business goes through these steps. That's how we did ours.
So final question. Any rules in business that you like to follow or recommend people abide to?
No, not really. I think every business has its own, unique set of challenges and requires its own unique set of rules, right? Because every business has a different consumer. Every business has a different team servicing that consumer. Every business has a different, environment in which they're working at a different time. So not really. I think that I think you've got to improvise a lot. Especially when you're an entrepreneur, you've got to improvise a lot. You've got to be flexible. You can't be too rigid. So, I would take sort of keeping an open mind and being unconventional as being an important point. And I would say that's, one of the reasons I think, Aid has been somewhat successful is that it's bringing unconventional ideas into fintech. So I go out of my way to hire people from other industries because I don't think hiring within the industry is going to bring around, great results. If people were doing great things within the industry, we wouldn't have a product that people like because it would be done before. So I think, it's an important point for people is be unconventional, be flexible, don't be rigid, and don't abide by too many rules.
So your suggestion on the rules is there are no rules.
There are no rules.
Fight Club. I like it. Well, thank you so much for your time. Thanks for giving your time to our listeners and to me today. I appreciate it very much. And we look forward to seeing 8 Securities continue to grow and do well under your management. So thank you so much.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to the Good Luck Club podcast. We know you have thousands of podcasts you could be listening to, and you've chosen us. We, of course, feel lucky. If you want to hear more, please go to thegoodluckpod.com or go to any of our social media pages and share with us your views, your insights, and any way that we can improve what we're doing to make it a better experience for you. We wish you the best of luck.